I arrived at Helios Prime beneath the silent glow of 1,000 stars, my shuttle disappearing into one of the station's countless docking bays. The station was more than a political capital, it was the heart of the galaxy. Ancient empires, powerful alliances, and hundreds of civilizations gathered here to decide the fate of trillions. At the center of every debate stood one document older than humanity's presence among the stars, the Galactic Weapons Accord. For centuries, it had prevented devastating wars by requiring every member civilization to declare and register its military technology. Nothing capable of waging war was supposed to remain hidden. As I entered the Senate chamber, I noticed something unusual. Delegates who normally ignored the human representative were watching me. Massive holographic displays illuminated the chamber, revealing industrial reports, mining statistics, and manufacturing records from every member world. When Earth's production figures appeared, quiet conversations spread through the ancient hall. Our factories, orbital shipyards, and resource extraction operations had expanded far beyond what our declared military required. To the Senate, there was only one explanation. Humanity had hidden something. The accusations did not end with the intelligence briefing. They grew louder with every senator who requested the floor. Representatives of the oldest empires argued that no civilization could justify an industrial expansion of such magnitude without secretly building weapons. They displayed graphs comparing Earth's declared military production against the staggering increase in mining, orbital construction, and automated manufacturing. To them, the conclusion was obvious. Humanity had violated the Galactic Weapons Accord, and if such a breach were ignored, every treaty that had preserved peace for 9 centuries would lose its authority overnight. I remained silent while they debated my world as though it were absent from the chamber. The Coran delegate warned that young civilizations often became reckless once their economies matured. The Valoran Imperium insisted that hesitation would encourage other members to conceal military projects of their own. Even species that had previously traded peacefully with Earth reluctantly admitted that the evidence appeared convincing. Their arguments were calm, logical, and supported by numbers. None of them spoke from hatred. From their perspective, they were defending the law that had prevented galactic-scale war for generations. After hours of discussion, Supreme Chancellor Vale called for a formal vote. The enormous chamber fell silent as thousands of voting lights illuminated the Senate floor. Green after green appeared across the ancient hall. Only a handful of delegates hesitated before casting their decisions. The result was overwhelming. The Galactic Senate would issue an ultimatum. Earth was ordered to surrender every undeclared military system for immediate inspection. Any technology that violated the accord would be confiscated and dismantled under Senate supervision. Refusal would trigger economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and, if necessary, military enforcement by the combined fleets of the member civilizations. The Chancellor rose once more, his voice carrying through the silent chamber. Let the Terran Union understand that this decision is not punishment. It is preservation. No civilization stands above the accord. Every gaze slowly turned toward me. For the first time since arriving on Helios Prime, the entire galaxy was waiting to hear what a single human would say. I rose slowly from my seat, smoothing the front of my uniform before stepping onto the speaking platform. The chamber watched in polite silence, though I could already read the assumptions in countless unfamiliar eyes. To them, I was merely the representative of a young civilization standing before powers that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. My words were expected to be an apology, a request for leniency, or perhaps an attempt to negotiate softer terms. No one expected resistance. Certainly no one expected confidence. The distance from my seat to the center of the chamber was surprisingly long. Every measured step echoed beneath the enormous dome of Helios Prime. Ancient banners hung overhead, each representing an empire older than recorded human history. They had survived wars, plagues, and the collapse of entire stellar kingdoms. Humanity had been part of the Senate for less than a century. Compared to them, we were children. I reached the podium and rested both hands upon its polished surface. The translation systems activated automatically, preparing to carry every word into hundreds of languages simultaneously. Ambassador Ryan Carter, Chancellor Vail said, his expression calm, the Senate has delivered its decision. Does the Terran Union accept the terms of inspection? I looked around the chamber before answering. Admirals, ministers, scientists, monarchs, and diplomats returned my gaze with varying degrees of curiosity. Most appeared certain they already knew my response. When I finally spoke, my voice remained steady. The Terran Union recognizes the authority of this Senate. Several delegates nodded with visible satisfaction. We therefore acknowledge your right to confiscate every weapon humanity has officially declared under the Galactic Weapons Accord. The approval spread quickly through the hall. Then I continued. But before you do, I ask each of you one question. Silence settled over the chamber. I met the Chancellor's eyes without hesitation. Are you absolutely certain, I asked quietly, that you understand what humanity considers a weapon? For 3 long seconds, no one answered me. The silence spread through the Senate chamber like a ripple across still water before it shattered beneath an explosion of laughter. Delegates leaned back in their seats, exchanging amused glances as if I had delivered the finest joke of the session. The Corran Admiral struck the arm of his chair with one heavy fist, unable to suppress his amusement, while the Valoran ministers whispered openly about human arrogance. Even several neutral observers smiled politely, convinced they had just witnessed a desperate attempt to disguise surrender as confidence. An interesting performance, one senator declared. But words cannot conceal violations of the accord. Another rose immediately afterward. Young civilizations often confuse clever speeches with leverage. You possess neither. The laughter slowly faded, replaced by a chorus of criticism. Some accused Earth of bluffing. Others insisted I was merely buying time for hidden fleets to escape inspection. A few demanded that the confiscation begin immediately, arguing that every passing hour increased the possibility of evidence disappearing forever. The discussion became louder, sharper, yet remarkably predictable. Every argument rested on the same assumption. Humanity's strength could only exist in weapons powerful enough to threaten the Senate. None of them considered another possibility. Chancellor Vail finally restored order with a single gesture. The representative from Earth has offered no evidence contradicting the findings of the investigation. He turned toward me. Does humanity refuse inspection? I answered without raising my voice. No. A murmur swept across the chamber. We welcome your inspectors. They may confiscate every military system we have officially registered. The Chancellor narrowed his eyes. And the undeclared systems? I allowed a faint smile to appear. If your inspectors can identify them, I replied, they are welcome to confiscate those as well. Before anyone could respond, the Senate initiated the final vote. Green lights ignited across the chamber in overwhelming numbers. The confiscation order passed almost unanimously, and enforcement fleets received authorization to depart for the Sol system immediately. Around me, satisfied delegates congratulated one another, convinced the matter had already been settled. I left the podium without another word. Behind me, debate resumed almost immediately, but it no longer concerned whether humanity had broken the accord. The decision had already been made. Senators discussed inspection schedules, fleet formations, and the procedures for cataloging whatever military technology they expected to uncover inside the solar system. Their confidence was complete. They believed the outcome had been decided before I had even entered the chamber. By the time I reached the diplomatic corridor outside, my communicator vibrated once. A single encrypted message. Status? I answered with equal simplicity. They approved everything. Proceed. The reply arrived before I lowered the device. Understood. Phase 1 active. Nothing more. No congratulations. No concern. No celebration. That was the human way. Plans either worked or they did not. This one had been prepared for generations. Far beyond Helios Prime, sunlight reflected from the immense hull of Liberty Station as it circled Earth in perfect silence. Officially, It served as the headquarters for orbital traffic control and civilian logistics. Unofficially, it had performed another function for nearly 7 centuries. Deep inside its command center, Admiral Jake Morgan looked up as the encrypted transmission reached his console. He read my message once. Then he nodded. Begin implementation. No alarms sounded. No officers rushed between stations. No dramatic countdown appeared across the displays. Instead, engineers quietly acknowledged their assignments while technicians unlocked archives that had remained sealed for decades. Entire departments activated procedures written by people who had died centuries earlier, each generation faithfully updating the instructions without ever questioning whether they would be needed. Across the solar system, hidden facilities awakened one after another, buried beneath lunar rock, concealed inside asteroid mines, and scattered through forgotten orbital habitats. Ancient systems quietly came online. Massive reactors synchronized. Autonomous factories checked their inventories. Data vaults verified centuries of engineering records. Logistics networks began exchanging status reports measured not in ships or missiles, but in raw materials, manufacturing capacity, and production time. Everything was proceeding exactly as humanity had planned, exactly as humanity had always intended. The command center aboard Liberty Station never felt like the headquarters of a military power. There were no towering banners, no ceremonial guards, and no speeches celebrating duty or sacrifice. Every console, every corridor, every workstation existed for one purpose alone: efficiency. I arrived through the secure diplomatic channel less than an hour after leaving the Senate. Admiral Jake Morgan met me in a conference room overlooking Earth. Our planet turned slowly beneath the station, peaceful and impossibly fragile against the darkness beyond. They believed every word of their own investigation, I said. Jake poured 2 cups of coffee before answering. They always would. I accepted the mug and studied the countless lights scattered across Earth's night side. The inspection fleets, already accelerating toward Sol, and the confiscation teams, they prepared enough cargo space to remove every weapon they ever declared. Neither of us smiled. They find exactly what we told them they defined, Jake continued. Every registered missile battery, every authorized defense platform, every treaty-compliant warship. We won, hide a single one. Because none of them matter. He nodded once. For 7 centuries humanity had quietly invested in something the rest of the galaxy never considered military. While other civilizations counted battleships, measured firepower, and negotiated weapon limits, we had built something entirely different. The Guardian Network. It stretched across the solar system like an invisible nervous system. Beneath the moon's surface, inside hollowed asteroids, beneath Martian plains, and hidden within civilian orbital infrastructure, automated shipyards waited in complete silence. Millions of maintenance drones serviced reactors that had never powered a weapon. Self-repairing factories refined raw materials continuously, storing components whose individual purposes appeared entirely civilian. Data vaults preserved every engineering design humanity had ever created, while logistics hubs calculated production routes decades into the future. None of it was classified as a weapon. None of it violated the accord. Because the network could not fire a shot. It simply ensured that, whatever humanity might someday require, we would never have to begin from nothing. That distinction had escaped the Senate completely. The Senate inspection armada entered the solar system exactly on schedule. Hundreds of warships emerged from faster-than-light transit beyond Neptune before reorganizing into disciplined formations that reflected centuries of ceremonial precision. They announced their arrival formally, transmitted the confiscation order in every recognized language, and requested immediate access to every military installation humanity had registered under the Galactic Weapons Accord. We granted every request. There were no protests, no delays, no legal arguments. Our officers welcomed the inspection teams aboard orbital stations, naval bases, and defense platforms exactly as the Accord required. Every registered missile battery was powered down. Every authorized warship surrendered its weapons without resistance. Containers filled with railguns, torpedoes, fusion warheads, and planetary defense systems disappeared into Senate cargo vessels while inspectors carefully verified serial numbers against the records humanity had submitted decades earlier. The admirals appeared satisfied. Their reports described exemplary cooperation. Several even congratulated us for avoiding unnecessary conflict, quietly remarking that reason had prevailed over pride. They believed the operation had ended before it had truly begun. Then the enforcement drones departed. Their mission was simple: locate the facilities the Senate believed still concealed humanity's illegal arsenal. Thousands of autonomous craft accelerated toward the asteroid belt, the Moon, Mars, and dozens of orbital structures identified during years of surveillance. Their sensors penetrated warehouses, tunnels, reactors, factories, and communication arrays with relentless efficiency. What they discovered made no tactical sense. There were no hidden fleets, no forbidden cannons, no secret missile silos. Instead, every drone received unrestricted access to the Guardian Network's operating architecture. Factory schedules, resource inventories, construction algorithms, logistics routes, energy reserves, maintenance protocols. Everything was visible. The drones analyzed the information independently. Then, without receiving a single human command or hostile transmission, every machine reached the same conclusion. Mission continuation presented unacceptable strategic uncertainty. One by one, the drones terminated their inspection routines, reversed course, and transmitted identical recommendations to the Senate fleet. Operation suspended. Further action not advised. The reports reached Helios Prime before the inspection fleet itself. Senators assembled in emergency session expecting confirmation that humanity's hidden arsenal had finally been uncovered. Instead, they received page after page describing factories, logistics centers, automated mines, engineering archives, and industrial infrastructure unlike anything the Senate had ever classified. There were no prohibited weapons to confiscate because the inspectors had found something the Accord had never anticipated. I stood quietly as the chief inspector addressed the chamber. Humanity has complied with every confiscation order. A wave of satisfied murmurs swept through the hall. He continued before anyone could celebrate. However, our autonomous inspection systems encountered an industrial network extending throughout the entire Sol system. It is not armed. It does not violate any article of the Weapons Accord. Nevertheless, our artificial intelligence unanimously determined that further interference presents unacceptable strategic uncertainty. The chamber fell silent. One senator rose immediately. Strategic uncertainty is not a legal classification. No, the inspector replied calmly. It is the conclusion reached independently by every enforcement drone. The holographic display shifted, revealing thousands of construction facilities hidden beneath planetary crusts, inside hollow asteroids, and buried within orbital habitats. None contained finished warships. Instead, they contained production lines capable of manufacturing almost anything. Our analysts estimate, the inspector continued, that humanity can replace every confiscated weapon in less time than our fleet requires to transport it beyond the solar system. Confusion spread across the chamber. The Coran admiral slammed a heavy hand onto his desk. Impossible. Destroy the factories. The inspector slowly shook his head. There are too many. Another image appeared. Then another. And another. The map expanded until nearly every major body in the solar system glowed with hidden industrial activity. For the first time since I had arrived on Helios Prime, I saw uncertainty in the faces of civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They had come to confiscate weapons. Instead, they had discovered humanity's ability to build them forever. I watched the chamber descend into arguments unlike any I had witnessed before. For centuries, the Senate had solved every military crisis by counting fleets, measuring firepower, and negotiating limits. Now none of those calculations mattered. Humanity possessed something no treaty had ever considered: the ability to replace losses faster than anyone could inflict them. The Chancellor finally struck the ceremonial staff against the stone floor. Silence. The chamber obeyed. The accord regulates weapons, he declared. Not industry. The Koran admiral rose immediately. Then amend the accord. Another senator shook his head. Even if we did, the amendment would not apply retroactively. Then destroy the network before they expand it further. All eyes turned toward the chief inspector. He answered without hesitation. We have modeled that scenario. A new hologram appeared above the chamber. It showed the solar system covered by countless points of light. Lunar complexes, Martian foundries, asteroid refineries, orbital construction platforms, civilian logistics hubs, every installation connected to thousands of others through overlapping supply chains. The Guardian network has no central command facility, the inspector explained. No critical node, no irreplaceable shipyard. Elimination of 100 facilities reduces total production by less than 1%. Elimination of 1,000 facilities delays recovery by approximately 11 days. Silence spread once again. Someone whispered the obvious question. How many facilities exist? The inspector looked down at his report. Our latest estimate exceeds 400,000 active industrial sites. For the first time since humanity had entered the Galactic Senate, nobody looked at me with suspicion. They looked at me with calculation. They were no longer asking whether humanity possessed hidden weapons. They were trying to determine whether an industrial civilization of this scale could ever be defeated at all. And I already knew the answer. So did they. I expected fear. Instead, I witnessed denial. The chamber erupted once more, not because the senators doubted the inspector's numbers, but because they refused to accept what those numbers meant. Empires that had survived for tens of thousands of years could not imagine a civilization measuring strength in production instead of possession. To them, weapons represented power. To humanity, they were merely products leaving an assembly line. The Chancellor requested another analysis. This time the Senate's Strategic Bureau answered. Our simulations indicate that a complete invasion of the Sol system would require approximately 12,000 capital warships. The Koran admiral nodded. We possess them. The analyst continued. However, projected human industrial output during the campaign exceeds all estimated combat losses. The hall became quiet. A second projection appeared. Every destroyed Senate vessel was matched by dozens of new human hulls leaving orbital shipyards before the battle simulations had even concluded. The Guardian network did not react to losses emotionally. It simply compensated for them. Production schedules shifted. Supply routes adapted. New factories expanded automatically. Every hour the invading fleet remained inside the solar system, humanity became stronger. How long until they exhaust their reserves? Someone finally asked. The analyst looked directly toward me before answering. We found no evidence that they rely on reserves. Another senator frowned. Explain. They rely on continuous production. That distinction changed everything. The galaxy had always prepared for war by building arsenals in advance. Humanity had prepared by ensuring the arsenal never had to end. I remained silent while the realization spread across the chamber. For the first time, no one questioned whether humans had violated the accord. A far more unsettling question now confronted every civilization present. What happens when your enemy treats every battle as nothing more than another manufacturing order? No simulation produced an answer. Not a single one ended with a Senate victory. The emergency session continued long after the official agenda had collapsed. Every proposal placed before the Senate ended with the same conclusion. Humanity had not broken the weapons accord. Humanity had simply obeyed it more completely than anyone else. While every great empire focused on limiting weapons, we had invested in the ability to create them whenever necessary. Then the oldest senator in the chamber slowly rose. He belonged to a species that had entered the stars before human civilization had discovered iron. Throughout the debate he had remained silent, listening instead of arguing. When was the Guardian network begun? He asked. Every eye turned toward me. I answered without hesitation. 683 years ago. A ripple spread through the chamber. Before the weapons accord? 141 years before it. The silence that followed felt heavier than any accusation. The old senator lowered his gaze. So while we negotiated restrictions on fleets, humanity was constructing an industrial foundation that the Accord would never regulate. Yes, and every generation continued the project. Yes, no government abandoned it? No. The Chancellor stared at me. You spent nearly 7 centuries preparing for a war that never came. I shook my head. No. He frowned. Then what were you preparing for? I looked around the chamber before answering. The day preparation would be mistaken for aggression. No one spoke. At last they understood why humanity had never protested inspections, never hidden facilities, and never resisted confiscation. The Guardian Network had never existed to threaten the galaxy. It existed because history had taught us that the strongest civilization was not the one with the largest arsenal. It was the one that could lose everything and calmly build it all again before its enemy recovered from the first victory. No vote was called that day. For the first time in recorded Senate history, the emergency session adjourned without a resolution. The delegates returned to their embassies carrying the same question. If humanity could not be disarmed, then what exactly had the weapons accord accomplished? I remained inside the chamber after the others had departed. The Chancellor approached slowly. You knew this would happen. I believed it was possible. You never intended to challenge the Senate. No, you intended to challenge the definition of a weapon. I nodded. For several moments neither of us spoke. Finally he looked toward the great holographic map of the galaxy suspended above the chamber. We spent centuries limiting the instruments of war, he said quietly. You spent the same centuries ensuring war could never exhaust you. Yes, he closed his eyes. We misunderstood your civilization. You misunderstood our history. That answer seemed to trouble him more than anything else. Every elder race had evolved on stable worlds, protected by predictable climates and abundant resources. Their civilizations had grown through continuity. Humanity had not. Our species had survived extinction events, collapsing ecosystems, global conflicts, and centuries where rebuilding became more important than victory itself. Preparation had become instinct. Redundancy had become culture. Production had become survival. The Chancellor finally faced me again. If another civilization built a second Guardian network, would humanity oppose it? I answered immediately. No. He seemed surprised. Why? Because a civilization capable of thinking 7 centuries ahead is rarely the one that starts unnecessary wars. For the first time since my arrival on Helios Prime, the Chancellor offered a faint smile. Not because he was reassured. Because he had finally understood why humanity had remained calm from the beginning. We had never feared losing our weapons. We had only wondered how long it would take the galaxy to realize they had been looking at the wrong measure of power all along. A year passed before I returned to Helios Prime. This time there were no accusations waiting beneath the Senate dome. No inspection fleets stood ready beyond the system. The emergency committees had dissolved, replaced by engineers, economists, logistics experts, and historians. The galaxy had reached a conclusion that none of its admirals had imagined possible. The Guardian Network could not be defeated, only understood. The Chancellor opened the session himself. The Weapons Accord was written to prevent wars of annihilation, he began. Instead, we discovered a civilization that made annihilation strategically meaningless. He looked toward me. The Senate has prepared a new proposal. A holographic document appeared above the chamber. It was not another treaty limiting weapons. It was the Industrial Stability Charter. Every member civilization would be encouraged to build redundant infrastructure, distributed manufacturing, emergency logistics, and autonomous reconstruction systems. Military strength would no longer be measured only by the number of ships a nation possessed, but by its ability to survive catastrophic losses without collapsing. Several senators hesitated. Others approved immediately. None opposed it. I signed the charter without negotiation. Not because humanity needed it. Because the galaxy finally understood the lesson we had spent centuries learning. Weapons disappear. Factories remain. Fleets burn. Shipyards endure. Victory fades. Production continues. As the ceremony ended, the Chancellor quietly stopped beside me. You could have conquered us. I looked across the immense chamber where civilizations older than recorded human history now debated infrastructure instead of conquest. We never wanted your worlds. What did humanity want? The same thing we built for ourselves. He waited. A future that could survive losing everything. He nodded slowly. For the first time since humanity had joined the Galactic Senate, no one looked at us as an unpredictable young species. They looked at us as the civilization that had quietly prepared the galaxy for disasters it had never believed possible. And that changed the future far more than any weapon ever could. Years later, I stood beneath the Senate dome one final time. The chamber was quieter than I remembered. The weapons accord still existed, but beside it stood the Industrial Stability Charter, adopted after the Sol inspection. The galaxy had accepted a truth it could no longer ignore. Weapons could be counted, confiscated, and destroyed. The ability to build them could not. As the session ended, the Chancellor walked beside me. You changed the galaxy without firing a single shot. I looked toward the stars beyond the Great Dome. No, I replied. The galaxy changed the moment it understood that preparation is stronger than intimidation. He nodded slowly. That day, humanity left Helios Prime exactly as we had arrived. Without celebration, without demands, without victory parades, history would remember the Sol inspection as the day the Galactic Senate came to confiscate humanity's weapons. Few would remember what it had truly discovered. Humanity's greatest weapon had never been hidden inside an arsenal. It had always been the civilization that could calmly build another one.